With us to outline what the organization is calling for is the CTF's federal director, Mr. Franco Terrazzano. Sir, welcome back to Forum Daily.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
So firstly, can you highlight the CTF's concerns around inflation?
Well, this could be one of the key economic issues facing Canadians. This inflation means our paychecks are buying less, our savings are being eroded, and it doesn't take a PhD in economics to understand how the government is influencing these higher prices. We've seen an unprecedented amount of government spending, massive amounts of government borrowing during the pandemic. We've seen the printing press on overdrive during the pandemic, and we've even seen tax hikes during the middle of the pandemic. So we've got these Canadians, we're being soaked by higher prices, but it really feels like our politicians in Ottawa are asleep at the wheel.
Now, speaking about Ottawa, we know the House of Commons resumed today. So what specific measures is the CTF calling for the feds to take in order to address inflation?
There's three specific things that we're looking for. Number one, we need to see these politicians rein in the massive amount of spending and massive amount of government borrowing. Number two is we need to make sure that we're not seeing all these new dollars printed by the government's central bank, because the more dollars that the government prints, the less your dollars buy. And number three, we need to see some tax relief.
All right, sir. Well, talking about energy prices now, we know energy prices are not only a concern in North America, but around the world. So let's talk about Canada's situation in terms of energy prices and how the feds can address these rising costs.
Well, unfortunately, we're seeing the federal government move in the wrong direction. We've already seen the Trudeau government's carbon tax increase twice during the middle of the pandemic. It's set to go up again next year. And by 2030, Trudeau wants to soak drivers for about 40 cents per liter of gasoline through his carbon tax. And he also wants to impose a second carbon tax through fuel regulations that could add another 11 cents per liter to the price of gasoline. And now, unfortunately, we even see the official opposition under Conservative Party leader Erin O'Toole, who also wants to impose a carbon tax of his own.
And on top of energy prices, we're seeing the prices at the grocery stores rise as well. So what does the CTF want to see from the government to address these issues in particular?
Well, there's so many different factors that can influence these rising prices. But one of the key factors is that the government can print new dollars out of thin air, but it can't print up new farmland out of thin air. It can't print up new groceries out of thin air. So essentially, we're seeing the problem where you have too many dollars chasing too few goods. Now, during the pandemic, we've seen the printing press on overdrive. We've seen the Bank of Canada create about $370 billion. Now, that's a 300% growth in the Bank of Canada's assets, which is significantly higher than what we saw during the 08-09 recession and during the recessions of the 90s and the 80s. And a large chunk of what the Bank of Canada is buying up is Government of Canada debt.
Now, considering this debt, if the federal government stops borrowing and cuts taxes, would that make the issue of inflation more dangerous for Canadian families in the short term?
Well, if they actually reduce taxes, it would provide some relief. It would allow us to keep more of our dollars in our own pockets. And we have seen other countries do just that. We saw South Korea reduce its gas taxes by 20%. We just saw India provide gas tax relief as well. And here in Canada, taxes make up between 31 and 42% of the pump price. So if politicians really want to help make life more affordable, they can start by reining in the massive tax bills we're paying at the pumps.
All right, sir, just about 45 seconds left here, but we just got off the election in September. So how do the campaign spending promises of the major parties line up with what the CTF is calling for from the feds?
Well, unfortunately, all three of the major parties want to spend even more money that we don't have. We heard from the NDP, they wanted to increase government spending by more than $200 billion. The Liberals, they wanted to increase government spending by about $78 billion. And even the Conservatives wanted to increase the last Liberal government budget by about $50 billion. So that would be taking us in the wrong direction. Instead, we need to see them rein in government borrowing and provide us with some tax relief.
All right, Mr. Terrazzano, Federal Director of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, thank you again for your time today.
Hey, it was my pleasure.